Hey everyone, welcome back. You know, we always get a ton of questions about surrogacy.
Yeah, it's definitely a hot topic these days, and for good reason.
It's such a fascinating and complex world, right? And with so many people looking for different paths to parenthood.
Exactly.
So we're taking a deep dive into affordable surrogacy options globally.
Love it. Always happy to dig into this stuff.
And we're lucky enough to have a treasure trove of information from OVU.com, that global fertility network. They've got some great insights.
Definitely a go-to resource for sure.
Okay, so before we even get into specific countries, let's just do a quick, surrogacy 101.
Sounds good to me. Back to basics.
Because I know there are different types of surrogacy out there. We've got traditional surrogacy, and then there's gestational surrogacy.
Right, and those are very different.
Yeah, so with traditional surrogacy, the surrogate is actually using her own egg, which means she's genetically related to the child.
Exactly, biologically related.
But then with gestational surrogacy, the surrogate is carrying an embryo that's created through IVF.
Right, so the embryo is created with the intended parent's genetic material or maybe even donor material.
Okay, so the surrogate is not genetically related to the child in gestational surrogacy.
Exactly, it's more like they're lending their womb, so to speak, to help create this family.
That's a good way to put it. So it seems like most of what we hear about these days is gestational surrogacy. Is that accurate?
Yeah, you're definitely right. Gestational surrogacy has become much more common, especially when we're talking about international surrogacy.
Any thoughts on why that might be?
Well, I think a lot of it comes down to those legal and ethical considerations.
Yeah, because with traditional surrogacy, there's that direct biological connection, which can make things more complicated.
Exactly. It can lead to like custody battles or just emotional challenges down the road.
Yeah, I can see that. So gestational surrogacy kind of helps to avoid some of those potential issues.
For sure. It offers a little more clarity.
Right, and maybe even a little bit of separation, emotionally speaking, which could be really important for everyone involved.
100%. It's about protecting every involved, the surrogate, the intended parents, and of course the child.
Absolutely. Okay, so sticking with gestational surrogacy, because that seems to be the more common path these days.
Makes sense.
OVU.com talks about two main approaches, commercial and altruistic. What's that all about?
So it boils down to this. In commercial surrogacy, the surrogate receives like a salary, on top of all the medical expenses. So she's basically being compensated for her time and effort.
Okay, so it's more of a financial transaction.
Kind of, yeah. But with altruistic surrogacy, the surrogate's motivation is really about helping someone else create a family.
So it's coming from a place of pure generosity.
Exactly. They might receive some compensation to cover their expenses, but it's not about the money. It's about giving the gift of parenthood.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so two very different approaches within gestational surrogacy. I can see why it's important to really understand that distinction.
It can definitely influence your choices and where you might consider going.
Makes total sense. All right, so let's say someone is considering gestational surrogacy and they're looking for a more affordable option. Where in the world should they start their search?
Well, one country that often comes up is Colombia.
Ah, Colombia. Beautiful country. What's the surrogacy scene like there?
So Colombia is known for being very welcoming, especially to LGBTQIA plus couples.
Oh, wow. That's fantastic, because I know a lot of other countries have restrictions based on sexual orientation.
Exactly. So Colombia is really leading the way in terms of inclusivity, which is a big deal for a lot of people.
It's amazing to see that kind of openness. Okay, so Colombia is inclusive. What else should we know about their approach to surrogacy?
Well, in Colombia, surrogacy has to be altruistic.
Okay, so it's more about helping families than a business transaction.
Right. It's about people helping people.
Yep, I like that. What else? What about using the surrogate's own eggs? Is that allowed in Colombia?
Nope, they don't allow that.
Yeah.
So if you're going to Colombia for surrogacy, you would need to use donor eggs.
Got it. So altruistic and donor eggs are the main things to remember about Colombia. Now, let's talk about costs, because I know for a lot of people that's a huge factor in all of this.
Oh, for sure. And Colombia is actually a pretty affordable option.
Right.
We're talking like $54,000, $75,000, give or take, depending on the program.
Okay, so potentially less expensive than some other places, but like we were saying earlier, cost isn't everything.
Not at all.
What about the legal side of surrogacy in Colombia? Because that's got to be a big consideration too, right?
Yeah, that's where things can get a little tricky.
Oh, how so?
Well, Colombia's legal framework is still developing. It's not as established as in some other countries.
So there might be some gray areas.
Exactly. especially when it comes to like parental rights and all of that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's super important to work with lawyers who really know their stuff, specialists in surrogacy law in Colombia. They can help you navigate all that stuff.
Right, so you're not caught in any legal limbo.
Exactly.
Okay, so Colombia sounds promising, more affordable, open to LGBTQIA plus couples, but you definitely want to make sure you've got your legal ducks in a row.
100%.
All right, let's move on to a country that I've always wanted to visit, Cyprus.
Oh, nice. Island life while you're on this journey.
Exactly. Sun, sand, and surrogacy.
Well, maybe not all at the same time, but you get the idea.
Ah, fair enough. Okay, so tell us, what makes Cyprus a good option for surrogacy?
Well, legally speaking, they're very open.
Oh, how so?
They have this very clear, straightforward legal framework around surrogacy, and they don't discriminate based on sexual orientation or marital status.
Wow, that's amazing. So it's a very accessible option for a lot of people.
It really is. It's designed to be inclusive.
Okay, but inclusive often comes with a price tag. What's the financial situation like in Cyprus?
Yeah, so you're looking at around $56,000 to $89,000 in Cyprus.
Okay, so a bit pricier than Colombia.
A bit, yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, the final cost always depends on a bunch of factors, like whether you're using your own genetic material, if you need donor eggs, or if you're using frozen embryos, and then obviously which clinic and program you choose.
Right, because every clinic has its own pricing structure.
Yeah.
Okay, so Cyprus, a bit pricier, but the trade-off is that really clear, inclusive legal framework. I think that peace of mind is probably worth a lot to people.
Absolutely. No legal headaches is a huge plus.
Definitely. Okay, one more thing about Cyprus before we move on. OVU.com mentions something about anonymity for donors.
Oh yeah, that's another big one for Cyprus. They take donor anonymity very seriously.
Okay, so what does that mean exactly?
It means both egg and sperm donors can remain anonymous. Their identities are protected.
Oh, wow, so it's like total privacy for the donors.
Exactly. Which can be a deciding factor for some donors and even for some intended parents.
Right. Some people really value that confidentiality. So Cyprus has a lot going for it. Legal clarity, anonymity, a beautiful location. I'm starting to see the appeal.
Yeah, it's definitely ticking a lot of boxes.
It is. Okay, let's switch gears a bit and talk about a country known for its vibrant culture and delicious food. Mexico.
Viva Mexico! Always down for some tacos.
Who isn't? Okay, but seriously, what's Mexico's approach to surrogacy like?
Well, they're pretty open-minded. They're cool with both traditional and gestational surrogacy.
Ah, so they offer both options. Interesting. Although, as we've discussed, gestational surrogacy seems to be the way to go these days, just to avoid those potential legal tangles.
Yeah, I think most experts would agree with that.
So let's stick with gestational surrogacy in Mexico. What's the price range look like there?
You'll find a pretty big range in Mexico, actually. It can go from as low as $45,000 to as high as $90,000.
Wow, that's quite a difference.
It is. A lot of it depends on the specifics. Like if you're using your own eggs, it's usually the most affordable.
Okay, that makes sense.
But if you need a donor egg, especially a traveling egg donor, it can bump up the cost.
Ah, I see.
And then some programs offer like guaranteed success rates, which also tend to be pricier.
Ah, so you're paying a premium for that added assurance.
Exactly. It's all about weighing your options and what's important to you.
Totally. So Mexico's got that flexibility, but that also means the cost can fluctuate quite a bit.
Got it. Okay, what about the legal side of things in Mexico? Because we've seen it can be quite different from country to country.
Yeah, Mexico's a bit of a mixed bag, legally speaking.
Oh, how so?
Well, some states are much more surrogacy friendly than others, and the laws aren't always applied consistently.
Ah, so it's kind of a regional thing? Kind of, yeah. So again, it's really important to have a good lawyer who specializes in this area and who knows the ins and outs of Mexican surrogacy law.
Okay, I'm sensing a theme here. Don't skimp on legal advice.
Seriously, it's worth its weight in gold in this process.
All right, so Mexico, potentially more affordable, lots of choices, but that legal landscape requires some extra attention. Got it. All right, let's move on to a country that's been getting a lot of buzz in the surrogacy world, Georgia.
Yeah, Georgia's interesting.
What's the deal with Georgia? What makes them stand out?
Well, they've got beautiful scenery,
Okay, always a plus.
and their surrogacy costs are generally pretty reasonable.
Music to my ears. But there's a but coming, isn't there?
You know me too well. But
Oh.
their surrogacy laws have this big restriction.
Oh no, what is it?
It's only available to married heterosexual couples.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that definitely narrows down the pool of potential parents.
It does. So even though Georgia might seem appealing on the surface,
Yeah.
it's not an option for everyone.
That's really important to know right off the bat. Okay, but let's say you are a married heterosexual couple. What does Georgia offer in terms of surrogacy programs and costs?
Well, like I said, their costs are pretty competitive. We're talking like $34,000 to $110,000, depending on the program.
Okay, so that's quite a range.
It is, but you've got options. You can use your own genetic material, or there are egg donation programs. And get this, they even have a program for twins with two surrogate mothers.
Wait, what? Twins with two surrogate mothers? How does that even work?
I know, right? Basically, each surrogate carries one embryo.
Wow, that's like next level surrogacy, and I'm guessing that's on the pricier end of the spectrum.
You bet. Having two surrogates obviously increases the costs.
That makes sense. Okay, so Georgia's got the scenery, relatively affordable options, but that restriction on who can access surrogacy is a major caveat. And on that note, let's move on to our final destination, Ukraine.
Ah, Ukraine.
Yeah, no, obviously we can't talk about Ukraine without addressing the elephant in the room, which is the current political situation there.
For sure. It's a very sensitive and complex issue, and it's definitely something that anyone considering surrogacy in Ukraine needs to be aware of.
Absolutely. And because the situation is constantly evolving, we don't want to speculate too much, but we do want to provide a complete picture. So we will be discussing the information that OVU.com has on Ukraine with the understanding that things could change. So, with all that being said, let's delve into what we do know about Ukraine. They've been a popular destination for surrogacy for quite a while now. What made them stand out?
Well, one of the biggest draws for Ukraine was that they had this very well-established surrogacy system.
Okay, so they've been doing this for a while.
Yeah, they were like pioneers in the field in a way.
Hmm.
They had this very clear legal framework specifically designed for surrogacy.
Ah, so people felt like they were on solid legal ground.
Exactly. Which is super important in this whole process, right?
Absolutely, because ultimately you're talking about creating a family and you want to make sure everything is legal and above board.
100%. So Ukraine had that going for them.
Okay, so they had the experience, the legal clarity. What about the costs?
Ukraine was known for being very affordable, especially compared to places like the U.S. We're talking like $30,000 to $50,000.
Wow. Okay, so significantly more affordable.
Yeah, which is why it was such an attractive option for a lot of people.
Right, because surrogacy can be so cost prohibitive.
Exactly. And Ukraine kind of opened up those possibilities for people who might not have had the budget otherwise.
Wow, so significantly more affordable than some of the other places we've talked about.
Yeah, and that's why it was such a draw for so many people.
Right, because as we've seen, surrogacy can be really expensive.
For sure. It's a major barrier for a lot of people. So Ukraine made it possible for people who might not have had that kind of money to still pursue surrogacy.
It's incredible how much we've learned just in this one episode, right? I mean, we've talked about different laws, different costs, different cultural contexts. It's a lot to wrap your head around.
It really is, but this is a huge decision.
100%.
So it's worth taking the time to really understand all the angles.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive into surrogacy around the world, are there any final thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with? Like, what are some of the things that people often overlook when they're just starting to explore this path?
I think the biggest one is the emotional side of things.
Ah, yes, of course. Because it is an incredibly emotional journey.
It really is, and it's different for everyone. But there are going to be a lot of ups and downs. There will be moments of excitement and joy when you hear that heartbeat for the first time or when the baby is born. But there will also be moments of anxiety, uncertainty, maybe even doubt.
That makes sense. It's a big life change.
It is. So having a strong support system is so important.
Like, what kind of support are we talking about here?
Well, your partner, of course, but also close friends, family members, maybe even a therapist. Anyone you can really be open and honest with about how you're feeling.
Because this is something you'll need to process.
Exactly. And it's helpful to have people to talk to who've been there, who get it.
Okay, so emotional support is crucial. Anything else?
And I know this should go without saying, but I think it's worth reiterating. The surrogate's well-being should always be the top priority.
100% agree with you on that one.
It's so easy to get caught up in your own desire to have a child, you know? But you have to remember that this woman is making a huge sacrifice to help you achieve that dream.
She's literally carrying and giving birth to your child.
Exactly. So you need to make sure that she feels supported, respected, and that she has access to the best possible care throughout the entire journey.
Okay, love that. So, to sum it all up, do your homework, find a reputable agency and experienced legal professionals, prioritize the well-being of the surrogate, and build yourself a strong support system.
That's it. You've got it. Those are the keys to a successful surrogacy journey.
And to our listeners, remember, this is your journey. There's no right or wrong way to do this. What matters most is finding the path that feels right for you, your family, and your values. Until next time, keep diving deep.